over and over again, it's the buildings with their distinctive array of gables that steal the picture. And this is certainly true of the town whose widely acclaimed title is the capital of the Cotswolds, Cirencester. Cirencester is on the Churn, a small tributary of the Upper Thames. Churn was originally Corin, hence the Roman name Corinium. Modern Cirencester occupies a very ancient site, the site of the second largest town in Britain during the Roman occupation. And the principal survivor, the amphitheatre, was, as usual, outside the town's defences. This originated in the early 2nd century as a grandly conceived centre for public sports and entertainments, and it is thought to have provided seating for up to 8,000 people. Close by the amphitheatre there are indications of a big Roman quarry, which might well have provided the stone for the town's earliest buildings. The Romans certainly made use of the local stone, as we can see in these excavated fragments of public sculpture. But for private citizens, the great status symbol was the floor mosaic. Well-to-do people might have several of these in their houses. This one is known as the hare mosaic, from the animal in the central roundel. Almost all the materials employed for these mosaics were stone. Little cubes about ½ an inch square, known as tesserae, laboriously cut from a variety of different kinds of stone according to whatever colours were needed. The creams and yellows came from the local Cotswold limestone. The browns, there's one, probably from the sandstones of the Forest of Dean. Then there are the blues. They come from the Blue Lias limestone down in the valley of the Severn. The darker stones, some of them certainly are Purbeck marble, those are. And then the red ones would have been obtained by firing clay as for bricks and tiles, you see there. These tesserae were all carefully bedded into cement and finally rolled and polished. Cester, Chester, and Castor all derive from the Roman word castrum, meaning a fort or fortified town. Thus, the modern name Cirencester means the fortified town on the Churn. When Leland was writing in the time of Henry VIII, he said that the name had been shortened to Cirencester, C-I-C-E-S-T-R-E. About 1725, Defoe said, Cirencester or Cirencester for brevity. And a century after that, Cobbett said, the local people call it Cititer, C-I-T-I-T-E-R. I can recall the time when many people were still saying Cirencester or Cirencester, but hardly anybody says that now. although I'm told many local people are in the habit of shortening the name just to Ciren, or even Zoiren. After about 1120, far and away the most important building here was the Augustinian Abbey. All that survives is this modest-looking north gate with its postern. At the dissolution, as in so many English towns, the abbey buildings became a convenient quarry for the new builders. And if we keep our eyes open, it isn't difficult sometimes to spot evidences of this pillaging. Just look at these great big blocks here. No timber frame cottages could ever have had plinths like those had it not been that the stone was there for the taking. But the site of the Abbey Church itself, which was half as long again as the present parish church, although not as wide, is now no more than a vast lawn and a lake, the grounds of a demolished house which were for centuries private, but which at last, in 1965, the council was able to purchase for the enjoyment of all. St. John's, erected parallel with the Abbey Church and just to the south of it, was of course the People's Church, the town church. This is the highest parish church tower in Gloucestershire, 162 feet. But it has to be said that as a design, it really is not a success. When it was started, about 1400, a spire was intended. But what the builders didn't know was that this was the site of a filled-in ditch, and so the foundations weren't firm, and the tower soon started to settle. Hence the very big buttresses, and also the awkwardness at the top. The projected spire had to be given up, and instead they added, above the broad horizontal band which arrests the tower's verticality, a short top stage which is very obviously an afterthought. But the south porch, one of the sights of England, wasn't under the control of the parish church at all until well into the 18th century. Surprisingly enough, it was built about 1490 by the Abbey, originally as a three-storied office building for the Black Canons. With its profuse panelling and its oriel windows in triplets, this is a truly sumptuous building. On entering the church, we are struck at once by the height of the arcades, the slenderness of the piers, and the huge scale of the windows. It's one vast glass house, as good an example as you'll find of Gothic structural ideas carried to their logical conclusion. I wouldn't call it exactly a lovable church, but a splendid one it certainly is. It contains a great deal that is interesting, and a few things which are rarely fine, like this stone pulpit of wine-glass form, one of the few pre-Reformation examples to have survived unscathed. For me, the greatest delight is the fan-traceried vault dating from 1508 over the long, narrow chapel of St. Catherine, immediately to the north of the choir. The mason craft is beautifully crisp and sure. To have an instructive view of Cirencester, the best way is to climb the church tower. So, up we go. 205 steps, some very dark, and no handrail. You have to pay 50 pence to go up this tower. My feeling is that you should be paid at least that for doing so. I know, though, that the views from the top make it all well worth the effort. Immediately below us is the marketplace. It isn't specially large, and it isn't regular. There's no hint here of a formal square or rectangle. The shape is much more organic than that, and subtler. The north side is concave and sweeps round in a gentle, continuous curve. The south side, which is convex, is a little more jerky, but the two sides set up an interesting counterpoint. From the church, we move on the north side into a chorus of painted stucco. There are many colours, but like the singing of a good choir, they blend harmoniously. The buildings are by no means all equally old, but the scale is right throughout. We couldn't have a better example of the value of setting up a conservation area. What matters here is the group, not so much the individual buildings. But remove even one of them, and it's like extracting a front tooth. Some of the buildings are of stone, or at any rate stone-faced. Others are only timber-framed under an overcoat of plaster. Only one building here has its timber frame exposed, and it doesn't take a moment to see how wrong it looks here, especially as what seem to be the timbers have been ill-advisedly blacked, whereas the infilling is extremely white. From a distance, it looks like a rather meaningless doodle. And close to, it turns out to be a fake. What purport to be timbers are, in fact, only painted stucco. Yet somebody must once have liked them. For a few years ago, the right-hand half of this hotel, a very seemly Georgian building, was, believe it or not, accorded the same treatment. The Civic Society raised such an outcry that all this nonsense was very properly removed. One man was lucky. The fellow who was employed to paint on the bogus timbers was the very same man who got the job of scrubbing them off again. What a pity he wasn't able to deal with this half in the same way while he was about it. On the other side of the marketplace, the buildings are larger, later, and more separate. All are ashlar, that is to say, faced with large blocks of sawn stone. And despite the usual expressionless sheet glass windows, the winner for once is Victorian, the Corn Hall, built in 1862. The fawn-coloured limestone is of fine quality. Especially good are the carvings by H.C. Frith in the tympana of the first-floor windows. A tympanum is the space between a lintel and the arch above it. Here in Thomas Street is the town's oldest secular building, Weaver's Hall, dating from the 15th century. I find this venerable rather than appealing. But weavers is a key word in Cirencester, for the Cotswolds were for many years one of the great wool-producing areas of England. Abbeys such as Cirencester raised flocks on the surrounding hills that every year produced large quantities of wool. And by the 15th century, regular wool fleets sailed from the English ports.
20. Let's move. Right, what have we got?
Gradually, the demand for Cotswold wool declined. Although today, local markets are witnessing a return in the popularity of Cotswold sheep for meat. But houses all over the town still recall the thriving wool trade of the 17th and 18th centuries. This house, like a good many in Cirencester, was given a new early 18th century front. It evidently yearns to be Georgian, but equally clearly is not. The proportions are quite different. The coarse rubble stone walling looks as if it was intended to be rendered. As it is, I find it a bit rustic looking. But within, it's an unspoilt Stuart house. There is, as we see, nothing in the least Georgian about this delightful staircase, with Ionic capitals crowning the flat balusters. And here is a room with exceptionally pretty panelling. The panels are shaped, which is most unusual. 100 yards further on is another wool merchant's house. To the left, connected with it, but a separate little building, is the counting house with its own entrance. Notice the simple but pleasing handrail. And another Cotswold speciality, the delightful stone roofing slates, textured and graded. As always in the Cotswolds, the slates are rather small. And round the corner is the former warehouse, with many of the windows unfortunately later blocked. The most elegant street in Cirencester is Cecily Hill. All the other streets are decidedly narrow. This one is very amply proportioned, with a contraction at the lower end. The most distinguished house is this one, early Georgian, with a pleasing doorcase, a bold, well-proportioned pediment, a modillioned cornice, and in all the windows original crown glass. Nearly all the houses here are just rubble stone. That's to say, built of unsquared stones, quite roughly hewn. But what funny things some people do to their houses. To this one, a Queen Anne house in stone, someone added, a century or so later, a canted bay window with Gothic tracery in brick. The special charm of this house is in fact the roof, with Cotswold stone slates and a trio of original dormers. From the outset, this wasn't a residence but a school. Although not built until 1717, the windows were never sashed. It's only on the first floor that they keep their original leaded lights. The narrow side wall of this building is an enjoyable oddity. Both the doorway and the window above are set within large, assertive, rusticated frames, decidedly rhetorical in character. Very imposing, though plain, is Dollar Street House, built just before 1800. Not this time by a wool merchant, but by a successful lawyer. The adjoining house here, known as Park House, is not quite so big, but much richer, and a good deal earlier too. There's the date, 1725, on the rainwater head. The elevation is gloriously exuberant, with moulded stone window architraves of elliptical form and prominent keystones. The big eaves cornice is also very satisfying. But the most striking and the most individual of all these houses is this one in Castle Street. Stone below and stone-faced stucco today above. Built about 1720 by a wool merchant who was clearly quite au fait with the latest fashion in architecture, this is Cirencester's one Palladian house. But I do wish they'd put the glazing bars back in the ground floor windows. It would make a tremendous difference to the ensemble. The proportion of window to wall area is quite different here from anything to be found elsewhere in Cirencester. The windows are in the so-called Venetian mode, though very few windows of this type can be found in Venice. There are all kinds of subtle details, executed with consummate craftsmanship. Only a short distance away is the town's one real mansion, Cirencester House. This is screened by one of the most extraordinary sights in England. A yew hedge said now to be 42 feet high and 12 feet wide at the top, more at the base. This hedge is prefaced by a curious gateway built of uncoursed rubble stone with rusticated ashlar coins and a moulded cornice surmounted by 3 ball finials. The house was built on the site of an Elizabethan manor house by the first Earl Bathurst between 1714 and 1780. At that time, it was the Whigs who commissioned nearly all the leading architects, all indeed except Gibbs. So it was they who got almost all the best houses. Now Lord Bathurst was a Tory, and he didn't commission Gibbs, nor indeed any architect at all, just the local mason. So the house, as he was the first to recognize, was decidedly plain. Not so the park, which was what really interested him. Bathurst was a passionate forester with a great interest in trees. He was also a friend and patron of Alexander Pope, who gave him a lot of help with the layout. The 10,000-acre park was laid out in the French manner, with straight avenues converging on rond-point. At one point, no fewer than 10 avenues meet. It was the last of the pre-landscape gardening parks, and one of the largest. The scale is truly immense. The journey down the broad avenue, culminating in a screen and gateway of exquisite early Georgian wrought ironwork, is not easily forgotten. Cirencester Park and the Abbey lands gave the town its shape. For centuries it was squeezed in between the two and only able to expand towards the southeast. Modern planning has on the whole been very skillful. There's a ring road, or to be quite accurate, 3/4 of a ring road, which takes most of the traffic well away from the centre. The new housing doesn't mar the architectural quality of the older streets. And beneath it all lie the remains, certainly not yet all unearthed, of what was, after London, the most extensive Roman town in England.